Welcome to Soul at Work. I'm Shiao-Yin Kuik. This podcast is for every leader out there who sees the gap between what they deeply value and how they actually work every day. So if you're done settling for all these surface fixes and you just want to go to the root of your work issues, then please join me. Each episode, I'll take you through one theme all the way through. The good, the bad, the ugly, and I'll leave you with one beautifully practical strategy you can bring to work tomorrow. This is not all talk. I built this podcast for practice. So let's go. If there's one thing I want you to get from this episode, it's this. Stop assuming your good work will speak for itself. Instead, I want you to put your most strategic impact stories out there into the world. That means tell everyone what's changing on the ground, how you're doing it, and show them how to make more of that good stuff happen. I want you to let every impact story you tell just fly like this arrow of insight straight into the heart of the audience you most need to reach. Let it pierce through all our unhelpful assumptions and outdated beliefs we have about what it actually takes to create change. Your impact story can totally open up new ideas and new ways that will work so much better for everyone involved in the field of impact work. The communities we serve, the funders we partner with, and our fellow impact practitioners doing the hard work on the ground. So don't keep your amazing insights a secret. Okay, let's start off with the good. I want to be super clear here that I see a lot of good in humble practitioners who just want their impact work to speak for itself. I deeply respect that some of the best impact practitioners I've worked with and learned from over the years, not that many people actually know them, and they are perfectly fine with it. After all, they didn't get into this work to be seen. They got into it because they genuinely care about what happens to people and communities, and that care shows up as humility, right? It's a quiet style of servant leadership, and they adamantly refuse to cast themselves as the hero. They don't want their contributions to outshine anyone else's, because they understand change work is deeply complex. Whatever impact they make cannot be attributed to them alone. They know it will take a whole ecosystem, not just one person, to raise a child, alleviate poverty, support team well-being, and cruelty to animals, etc., good cause. So they know that they are but one actor in a vast web of interconnecting players and factors, and they refuse to be grandiose about inflating the story of their work in the ecosystem's efforts. This refusal to broadcast one's impact work can come from a very good place. It's about patient faith and quiet confidence that in the end, the truth will prevail. If I do my good work with integrity, it will bear good fruit and it will stand the test of time, and I do not have to boast about it. So to say, let my good work speak for itself, I don't have to tell my impact story, I get that. It takes some humility, it takes some courage, and I will have enormous respect for that. Okay, now for the bad part. Remember, too much of a good thing, always a bad thing. And there is such a thing as good practitioners having way too much humility and keeping way too quiet for their own good. Not putting ourselves out there and not telling our impact story is costly for the practitioner, for the communities, for the funders who really want their money to achieve real meaningful impact. There is a price that we will pay for continual lack of good impact stories. That price is continual public miseducation. Everyone's going to keep misunderstanding about how complex and hard and costly impact work is, and they're going to keep misunderstanding how change really needs to happen. If us practitioners who understand most intimately about what works and what doesn't work do not persist in putting better, much more nuanced impact stories out there into the public conversation, we're going to get a vacuum. And vacuums do not stay empty. They get occupied by the same old, simplistic approaches, biases, and cultural orthodoxies that keep the field of change stuck. Okay, let's back up a bit. Cultural orthodoxies, that's a big word, very difficult word. But what is that? Cultural orthodoxies are just the unchallenged, unspoken beliefs that we generally accept as truth in our society. You can think of them as deep myths from which a lot of mainstream beliefs and behaviors flow. And some of these myths need to be challenged because, some of them are harmless, but some of them are really at the root of some really harmful dysfunctional practices in our field of impact work. There's a really funny, kind of rude nonprofit guy in America called Vula. He's infamous for co-founding the crappy funding practices movement that calls out harmful philanthropic behaviors that he sees in America. In his new book, Reimagining Nonprofits and Philanthropy, he identifies some persistent myths that he sees in America's nonprofit sector. Now, although he writes from an American perspective, I can see that these myths are also alive and well in the Asian and Singaporean nonprofit scene. Let me just name two. The first, it's the myth of the self-sustaining, self-sacrificing nonprofit. This is the belief that nonprofits must just do good for goodness sake, don't expect a high pay for it, but meanwhile also work towards financial independence. So this myth can sound like, hey, if you're a really good person, you should be more than happy to do good work for free. And if you're really that good, you can also stand on your own 2 feet and one day stop depending on us funders for grants all of the time. So I think this belief has a very unhealthy assumption in there that non-profit workers do not deserve to be paid like for-profit workers. And I think there's also a belief that some non-profits are really freeloading and parasites and cheats, and that's very, very unhealthy to believe in. In Singapore, some funders still operate from an unspoken assumption that we must guard against potentially greedy practitioners who want to make a profit from grants. And that is why some grants in Singapore to this day do not allow practitioners to pay themselves. They can spend a grant on community needs, on rent, on hardware, on photocopying, all of that stuff, which is, good to spend on, but they cannot give themselves something from the grant. There is a general reluctance to fund overheads as if that is a bad thing. And this has led to underpaid, undervalued practitioners burning out and leaving the non-profit field for good. I find it strange to ask non-profits to be both self-sacrificing and self-sustaining. Many non-profits are sincerely just trying to solve really hard, complex, expensive problems that they didn't create. And these problems, by the way, are very, very costly and they were left behind by governments or the rest of us in society. So non-profits, they are providing a really invaluable problem-solving service here and they ought to be fairly paid for taking on very hard work that few of us want to do. We don't tell a chicken rice hawker, I love your work, I want to support you, but I will only pay you $5 for your chicken rice if you show me a 5-year sustainability plan and how you intend to cut your overheads. And by the way, don't charge me $5, charge me $2 since you say you're passionate about feeding people good food. We wouldn't speak like that to a business, we'd think it's silly. So why would we speak like that to a non-profit? A chicken rice store becomes sustainable when it focuses on making really great chicken rice, offering great service, and telling great stories about their work. And when we like the chicken rice, we pay them fairly. We don't make them jump through like weird hoops to prove themselves worthy of our money, and we don't make them fill up like some 20-page proposal before we decide, okay, you deserve my money right now. So I think non-profits also deserve that respect. Like if they do good work, just pay them for it. Second, the business knows best myth. This is the belief that non-profits are this charming, lovely, but kind of naive organizations, and they need like a big, strong, smart business leader to come in and just show them what to do. Look at how mainstream non-profit boards are put together, and you can immediately see who is missing from the table. Usually trusted practitioners from the field and members of the communities being served. And these are precisely the people that you need to balance out the board a bit, and they can help the board and the general public understand a more balanced and grounded story of how impact must be supported, made, and measured. Non-profit boards tend to be overstacked with people bringing wealthy connections, corporate acumen, white-collar expertise, and institutional weight. And you can see how such imbalance on the board can lead to for-profit values dominating non-profit strategy. So non-profit leaders on the ground receive a lot of what some of us call biz-splaining, which means corporate-trained board members advising non-profits how to act more like a business and less like a non-profit. And the non-profit conversation then becomes predominantly about how can we be more efficient, productive, cut more costs, bring up the numbers, adopt the latest tech, and scale very big. Now, all of this corporate wisdom, it's not useless to the field. It's relevant, it's needed in nonprofits, but not all of the time and not in all circumstances. You cannot apply for-profit logic wholesale to carry out a mission that is fundamentally built around totally different outcomes. Non-profits are not called non-profits because they hate profit or are lousy with money. It's because the whole end goal of non-profits is impact, not profit. Supporting lonely old people is not always going to be profitable. Affordable healthcare for all, not always profitable. Making sure kids can read, not always profitable. But they are valuable, they are meaningful, and certainly well worth paying for. Now let's talk about the ugly stuff. When for-profit narratives continue to dominate non-profit work unchallenged, we're going to stop asking the right questions and we're going to start asking some deeply wrong ones. Like, oh, what is the ROI of walking a senior citizen to the clinic? How do we extract more value and energy from our volunteers in the first few months when they're all at peak enthusiasm? Ooh, tell me, what is the unit cost of a counselor? What? Then why don't we just get all these grieving people and lonely old folks to talk to an AI friend instead of these expensive counselors? AI is cheaper, it's not going to ask for a raise. I mean, these are real conversations happening in real organizations doing real impact work, by the way. And it's the kind of ugliness that we normalize when the immeasurable stuff gets disdained for not being measurable enough, the long term gets sacrificed for the short term, the relational stuff gets replaced by the transactional, and human solutions get dismissed as less cost efficient than technological fixes. And the practitioners, the people closest to the work, the ones who know exactly why none of this is going to make sense, stay a little too quiet because they don't believe anyone's going to listen to their impact story. They don't believe that, their views, their insights are worth sharing. And I think they totally are. Good work does speak for itself, but sometimes it speaks very softly, and it's going to need some skillful storytellers to raise the volume together because there is strength in numbers. When I was preparing for this podcast, I remembered a story about how I was once in this room listening to, let's just call this person a practitioner, okay? And they were reporting on an impact program that they were doing. And this program was designed to help obese students from less privileged backgrounds lose weight. The intervention was, let's get health coaches to make these cost-efficient 15-minute calls asking a standard list of questions like, what did you eat today? How much do you weigh now? Do you know bowls of rice are bad for you? I hope you can see where this is going. I was getting quite horrified as the report continued, and it was super obvious to me that the program was set for failure from the start. And it had been allowed to persist for years at considerable cost. And the final outcome was, not only did all of the students not lose weight, they actually gained weight. And I could sense that the practitioner who was doing the reporting out actually disagreed with this approach. And to this day, I still wonder, why did they choose to report it out to the room in this bland, business as usual, oh, what can we do way, rather than share it as an honest, impactful story about here are the hard lessons that we won from mission failure? It would have been so much more impactful to say, here are the facts of what happened, this is where we went wrong, these were the myths that we were operating on, and these are the lessons that we learned about what we cannot afford to keep doing if we are serious about students' health. That would have been such a great impact story. Very uncomfortable, but it's honest and it's also genuinely educational for everyone in the room and everyone in the sector. Impact storytelling is not meant to be a public relations exercise. It is not for showcasing our heroism, and it's not about making mistakes look good, and it's definitely not meant to be a bureaucratic reporting exercise just to fend off some pesky funder who wants to see paperwork. If we keep doing our impact reporting in this cynical way, then let's just prepare for things to get uglier, and I don't want that to happen. Great impact stories are insightful, vulnerable, honest, humane, and very, very educational for the whole sector. They help us to make contact with the truth about change making. That change is hard, change is costly, many factors are at play, and we're going to fail in some unexpected ways even as we try to do good. And that's why we can and must learn to do better together. Okay, so here's the beautiful part. Don't lose hope yet. I want to share with you like a story of what's been happening in this project that I've been involved in. So one of the most complex social impact projects I've taken on is a 9-year partnership with the government to run a civic centre in Singapore. We're at the tail end of the project, about like last 1.5 years, and I have learned so much from it, usually the hard way, making mistakes. Anyway, the greatest learning that I got from it is the part of the work that centers on helping practitioners in this civic centre report impact. In the first few years, the reports that me and my team helped our practitioners put together were written more like case studies, factual, technical, full of jargon, and lots of quantitative data. It was more on the cool and analytical side because I assumed, wrongly, that objectivity and numbers were what the funder would have wanted. Instead, the funders' feedback was quite interesting. It was, these reports, they're not that easy to read, and it doesn't really help us understand what's working on the ground about like how do we, have sustainable impact and encourage like active citizenry. So could you change up the reports a bit? And meanwhile, our community of practitioners were also miserable every time impact reporting season came around. They were like, oh, this is so not fun to put together. It's not fun to read. And then you give us this case study. It's not very helpful to us. And more importantly, they felt that the report fell flat in capturing the heart and soul and magic of what their most impactful work was actually about. So I took that feedback to heart and I changed our approach entirely. Instead of forcing practitioners to write a report, we got them to just share with us a story instead. We asked them, what are some unhelpful beliefs and practices your work keeps running up against? What are you choosing to do differently? What are you proudest about? What are you learning? And how is all of this panning out on the ground for you? We would then shape these answers into something that felt a lot more like a magazine article or kind of like a piece of photojournalism. It's written with a bigger system picture in mind, but it's still very much grounded in the smaller human experience. We wanted it to feel a bit more warm and relational, so there were a lot more quotes, reflections, and photos from practitioners, members of the community, and any funders involved in their story. So the result is funders and practitioners actually enjoyed reading these impact stories a lot more. And because they read it, they could actually learn something from it, right? So they could see themselves and their work with a fresh lens. They could also recognize shared systemic patterns across their different fields, and they could learn from each other what needs to be done differently. And because the stories were designed to also be aesthetically pleasing, they could actually share these stories now to potential supporters, partners, and funders who are also curious about their work. So the impact stories stopped being about a compliance document. It became more like a relationship building and learning asset. It was validating for the practitioners who produced it. It was useful for us as the steward, providing impact storytelling as some kind of support service. And it was also insightful for the funder who really wanted to understand how to do work with more impact. So the Civic Centre experience is what gave birth to the framework that I now use and teach in our strategic storytelling workshop. I call it the R.E.A.L framework because I want us to keep impact work and impact storytelling real. So think of it as like 4 very practical principles to help us test whether the impact story is doing the work that it needs to do. Okay, so R. R stands for real human being facing real power dynamics. So you want to make sure that your story has a specific person with a specific experience of system dynamics that is at the heart of your story. It shouldn't be a composite figure or some anonymous demographic. It should be a real person and all of the stuff that they're going through, the constraints, but despite that, they have real changes. This will help make your impact story not just more concrete, but also very relatable to your reader. Then there's E. E is evidence of change. So for this, you need both qualitative and quantitative evidence. If you only have numbers but no warm emotional story, it's not going to be very persuasive. And you have your warm emotional story but you don't give any like hard numbers, it's going to feel a little, unaccountable. So you need to have this cool data and warm data because you want to appeal to both the head as well as the heart. And evidence, by the way, is where most of us practitioners fall a little short because of our own biases about what's needed or what's priority. Right? So we tend to collect evidence from only the part of the system that we think is important. So like in our case for the Civic Centre, we prioritize quantitative over qualitative at first until we were corrected. Okay, so some of us are just going to get quotes from the community, but we forget to get quotes from our funders about how they changed through working with us. And some of us are not going to ask our team what they learned. We're not going to ask our partners whether they shifted their own processes because of our collaboration with them. And I think all of these changes actually matter because it tracks like how the whole system may be shifting, right? Not just like the specific part that we were focusing on. A stands for agency of all stakeholders. Our impact story needs to show that all of the players are active participants in the change. This is especially important when we're talking about the community, right? You want your community to be showcased as not just a passive recipient of your intervention. They definitely brought something to the table. They made decisions. They may even have resisted you. And you want to tell a story where you are not the hero. Your funder is not the hero, and the community is not just like some grateful beneficiary. It's not an honest or useful impact story. You want to let your story surface what everybody, funder, practitioner, and community, all had to bring to the table for change to happen. Finally, L. L is levels of systemic impact. Your story needs to connect the individual's experience to the team or the organization or the systemic conditions that made change easier or set up constraints that made change much more difficult. Because remember, impact doesn't happen in a vacuum. It has to contend with the context, right? And the context is made up of all these like cultural orthodoxies, biases, outdated beliefs. You want to show that. Your impact story should show how different parts of the system are changing or have to change. You don't want to just make all of the focus be on the person. You want to show the person in context of the system that created the problem. So this week, why not just take one impact story that you've told recently, it could be a report, a case study, funder update, and just, run it through these 4 principles and ask yourself, where did I pass? Where did I drop the ball a bit? And it's fine, it's a process, right? We're all going to learn. And whatever gap that you find, just see that as that's my area of practice. We're not after perfection here, we're after practice. Basically, keep your impact stories real, R.E.A.L. And very, very importantly, keep putting your stories out there. The only way we get better at telling stories is to just keep putting them out there, right? Every story that you tell, think of it as it's like a little power-packed mustard seed of mindset change. And it just needs to get scattered out into the world so that new and more fruitful approaches can just take root and bloom across the whole field of impact work. Just thinking of that, I don't know, it just makes me excited, right? Because I have no idea what kind of change your particular impact story can seed. So just go out there, scatter it. You really, really never know what you'll get until you just put it out there. Thanks for listening. If you want to go further than a podcast, join us for our training programs, or you can book us for an online consulting call at www.ourcommonground.com.sg. You can also find links to our current training schedule in the description of our bio and in every podcast episode. Hope to see you.